All right. So, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Ryan and Rodrigo. And today we're really lucky to be joined by my mom, who's here to tell us all about the different foods and ingredients that people in the United States like to use. And she's also going to talk about the different times that she's come to Brazil and seen the different foods that people like to eat here. So first, Mom, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Give everybody a little introduction to who you are.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Hey, I'm Ryan's mom, and my husband and I, Andy, have two other children, Lily, who's 25, and Marley is almost 20, I guess, next month. I have lived in this small, kind of rural town in Oregon since the early 80s for the most part, but was raised in an even smaller town in another part of Oregon. I attended Linfield College here in Oregon in the late 70s, early 80s, and graduated with a degree in home economics, which nowadays would be called Consumer and Family Studies. And I mostly did most of my classes in the food science area, not so much in the clothing, sewing, design, or the home and early childhood education, which I had a little bit of all of that, but mostly in the foods and nutrition. So I'm a bit of a foodie.
And just really quick, why did you study that? Why did you decide that you wanted to study all about food and food sciences? What was it that drew you to that?
Well, I'd always liked to cook and bake, and came from a long history of my mom and my grandparents were great cooks, and so I learned a lot from them. Originally went to college, didn't know what I wanted to do, and was a business major, and flunked accounting and flunked econ, and decided I needed to change my major. And I happened to be reading a magazine article about people with a degree in home ec and a minor in communications, and those people went on to promote food products, and I thought that sounded like something that I wanted to do. So I had to change schools, and that's what I did. Majored in home ec and minored in communication. Never really worked in that area, but anyway, it's still thankful. It was a great, well-rounded degree.
Mm-hmm. What was the? Go ahead, Rodrigo.
I guess taking care of Ryan, Lily, Marty, Andy qualifies as working in that area.
Correct. Yes, and a lot of the other jobs that I've had.
A lot of work, right? A lot of work.
Yes, it is.
And to get us started on some foods, I remember that one of the first times that you came down to visit me here in Brazil, something that you found really interesting was just going to the grocery store and walking around. And I remember one of the first days that you were here, we went to a very big supermarket in downtown Sao Paulo. It was a Supermercado Extra, for everybody to know. And you were just fascinated by all of the different foods or the different way that it was packaged or how things were different. So can you remember anything that was just really intriguing or different for you when you came down here?
Well, first of all, being a foodie, I think I've realized over the years that how every culture evolves around food. And so that is just interesting to me. And some cultures are definitely more into food than other cultures, but it really gives you a good idea and kind of a place to look at that culture when you look at their food. And so going to the grocery store in Brazil was very interesting to me. Some of the things that I noticed is like your pasta section. Our pasta section in a huge grocery store is like the whole aisle, the whole length of an aisle, different shapes and sizes and types of pasta and sauces. And in Brazil, it was very small. In the United States, in one of our grocery stores here in town, the cereal, breakfast cereal aisle is the whole length of the grocery store, both sides of the aisle. You can't imagine how many different kinds of cereal we have here. And cereal in Brazil does not look like that. So that gets me to asking questions. What do people in Brazil eat for breakfast? And what I had, I'd kind of picked up from Ryan, because you were down there for quite a few years before I visited, was Brazilians don't eat the same kind of breakfast as we do. I've observed that's mostly toast with butter or cream cheese and a lot of flavored cream cheese. And we would have some people eat that for breakfast, but it's not extremely typical. One of the foods that Allie has told me that does not exist in Brazil are bagels. And Rodrigo, have you had bagels?
I've had it, but it's we can find it here, and there were some brands that started to produce something similar to bagels, but it's not a thing here. It's not popular. I had it, but I didn't like it.
Yeah. Anyway, Allie really likes them. And anyway, we eat a lot of cereal. We also eat a lot of eggs, fried eggs, scrambled eggs. That is something else that I don't believe Brazilians use eggs in that way in their breakfast. So that's interesting to me. I actually took a picture of our typical breakfast this morning, but talking to Ryan, it got complicated trying to get pictures. But it was scrambled eggs with a little bit of spinach in it and hash browns and bacon. And of course, Andy puts ketchup on anything with potatoes, so they have to ketchup. Some of the other things I've noticed about food down there is you guys don't do a lot of sauces.
That's a very American thing that I've noticed from watching like food travel shows from around the world, is that Americans love sauces, just absolutely love sauces. And the rest of the world never really caught on to that, which is really disappointing because, sauces are pretty cool. I don't understand.
Ranch. I mean, yeah, and I'm not really sure the origin of that. I know your sister Marley was a terrible eater as a toddler, and as long as you gave her something to dip it in, she would eat it. Ketchup or ranch or mustard or whatever that might be. There were lots of things that she would eat if she had a dip. And then when I come to Brazil, I realize how much I miss sauces and dips on the food. So that's definitely one. In fact, I wanted to show you guys the three mainstays in the Kaufman household. And in one meal, we might have all three of these. So sour cream also does not exist in Brazil unless you make it, which Ryan made it for us last time we were there so we could have it on tacos. Mayonnaise. I know you have mayonnaise down there. I'm not quite sure if you have mayonnaise in this size.
Not in that size, no. And it's very disappointing that we have to buy like 10 small containers to get the correct amount of mayonnaise.
This is 64 ounces or 2 quarts or 1.9 liters. So this is a very big container, and we go through probably one of these a month at our house. Now, part of that is because Brian's dad loves mayonnaise. So, but I also use it in a lot of sauces that go on different kinds of salads. And anyway, we just use it a lot. The other thing that we have at way too many meals is cheese. And I know that was one of the things on Ryan's list that he wanted to talk about was all the cheeses that we have. But like this you'll find both of these 2-pound bricks, pepper jack and a medium cheddar in our refrigerators at all times. Do you have questions about cheese?
Rodrigo, did you want to ask anything about the cheese?
Oh,
We might have lost Rodrigo. Oh, there he is.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm here. Not, and well, we have a lot of different cheese around here. Not so much in São Paulo. We don't have original cheese from some. Well, we do, but not a lot. It's not something typical. It's cheese is something big in another state, Minas Gerais. It's really really big. I forgot the name of the animal. Goat cheese is big in Minas. And we have something similar to pepper jack, but it's not really spicy. Pepper jack is it's spicy and tasty, and the one we have around here is just mozzarella with some calabresa pepper sprinkled on it, and then they make a dough of cheese and kind of like Velveeta. Um, but nothing specific about cheese.
There's some
What do
Velveeta.
what do you guys use
I was losing.
for Velveeta?
Yes. So, which isn't really.
No, not really. I think I told you, or maybe Ryan have told you that I tried Velveeta straight out of the box.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it tastes funny. And it's weird enough that it comes in a box. Not like in a
It's
box.
not refrigerated. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
So growing up here in kind of rural Oregon, when I was a kid, we did not eat cheese nearly as much as I do now. I don't believe it was always in our refrigerator. And the cheese that we usually got to go on a sandwich, if we were lucky enough to have it around, was American cheese, which is similar to Velveeta and was wrapped in plastic, and you'd pull the plastic off and play. But somewhere along the line, either, I don't know if it was my family, but I've asked Andy and he said they didn't always have cheese either. I don't know, cheese was just developed. I think a lot of it may have to do with that Tillamook, which is a great kind of cheese, is out of Oregon. Maybe that they've just created just such a market for cheese that it's gotten bigger here in Oregon. Because I did notice when we were in Texas over the summers when Andy was going to school that they did not have nearly as much cheese as we do here in the Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Do you remember when I was young, did we always have cheese? We always have Tillamook cheese?
We always had Tillamook cheese when you were young. Yes.
Because I remember eating the plastic cheese. I remember eating that.
Paper cheese.
Yeah, yeah. And it was like Velveeta cheese in tiny slices.
Right. It's called American cheese, and actually Velveeta is also American cheese. It's just kind of the brand. But Kraft would have sliced cheese in plastic. So yeah, I think we did have that around as well.
Yeah.
we have that here, and it's pretty similar to I think it's similar to American cheese.
And it's not anything I've had in my refrigerator in years and years and years. Like, it's not anything I would choose to buy. Why, when we have great Tillamook cheese?
Yeah, but like one of the most popular cheeses here is the fresh cheese from Minas, which is like farm fresh cheese, I guess. And people use it in all kinds of different things. Like for breakfast, people will have a piece of French bread with fresh cheese on it, just cold.
Yeah, the fresh cheeses have really gained momentum here the last probably 5 to 7 years as well. And so when you go to the grocery store, you can find all of those fresh cheeses as well.
And if you leave, if you take a piece of Velveeta and you put it in your I don't know, you just forget about it. In 2 or 3 months, it might have turned into blue cheese or gorgonzola cheese, right? Something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot some Velveeta cheese in my cabinet for over a year, and it turned green. So
And it had been opened? Which,
no, yes,
okay.
no, I don't remember. I don't think so.
This I've had for probably 9 months, and maybe it got a poked hole in it or something. I mean,
Yeah,
as soon as you
maybe.
let some air in, that would still happen.
Usually, after I opened it, I would put it in the refrigerator and then try to use it the other half. But I don't think this one was opened. And the other cheese that's really popular here that I have no idea what to call it in the United States is Hekejom. And I guess it's like cream cheese, but it's much creamier than cream cheese. Right, Rodrigo?
Yeah, Hekejom is smoother, and Hekejom it was invented here in Brazil. I found it in some American supermarkets online because I've never been to America, but I found it online, and it's called spready cheese, or Brazilian cheese.
And we have different kinds, like we have a Boursin cheese, which is spreadable. Brie is spreadable. So we do have some cheeses like that as well. I mean, you name it, I think you can find that cheese here.
It's very similar to cream cheese, but it's
Mhm.
more liquid.
Oh, more liquid.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it more pungent, or it's still light and not as
It's
strong?
no.
The cream cheese is the taste is a bit sharper. It tastes more like cheese, cream cheese. Requeijão um, tastes more like milk. I don't know.
Yeah,
Cream
it's
cheese.
lighter, I guess, than
Yeah.
cream cheese.
Mm.
Yeah.
I have a few other things here. I was going to show you what Ryan lived on when he was in college. Um, although he just had, a lot of times, I think he just had helper.
That's
He
right.
did not.
Hamburger is expensive, man. You can't.
So
Hamburger.
then actually, our family, Marley's sister, or Ryan's sister Marley, actually asks for hamburger helper every once in a while. And now that she's living on her own, I believe she makes it. It's not the best, but it's not that bad.
I I think. I mean, it's kind of like stroganoff, isn't it?
Yes, and there's a stroganoff flavor that
Yeah.
you milk and maybe even some sour cream to give it some of
But
that more.
the hamburger helper is like if you take the stroganoff that you make in Brazil and make it really light, like really lighten it up, and then
Wait,
pour it over pasta.
this
And then
hamburger helper, is it like meat inside pasta?
No, yeah, you have to buy the meat to add to the package. The meat
and then,
comes from somewhere else. You have to buy
so
it
all
and add.
is a seasoned packet and pasta. I don't know, you can't really see it in here. I can't really hold. Anyway, it's just pasta in a seasoned packet, and you add water and sometimes milk and meat. And we also have chicken helper and tuna helper. So it's just a fast way of fixing something when you don't have to have all the ingredients because almost everything's in the box. It's just kind of a home fast food.
Like ramen, but a little better than ramen.
Yeah. I think Rodrigo wanted to ask about shortening.
Yes. So I'm actually curious about this too because I think that shortening isn't a thing here, right, Rodrigo?
No, it isn't.
Okay.
Maybe in the countryside, not maybe in the countryside or other states, but here in São Paulo, people don't use shortening anymore, especially
I looked at the history of shortening up. You back with us?
Yes.
Okay. So I looked the history of shortening up, and it was actually developed, gosh, like 200 years ago, but not really used until the earliest, like the 1920s. Probably having something to do with war. And it's lard, but made with vegetable oil instead of a meat product. Does that make sense? So when you use it in baking, you don't get such a strong meat flavor, which you don't really want your cakes and your cookies to taste like meat. So that's why it was developed. I believed it was marketed well as being more healthy. Whether it is or not, I don't really think so. But it was marketed well, and housewives started using it. It was being used a lot in the probably the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Then kind of went away. Although if you do look it up, there's a lot of cooks nowadays that say, there's some recipes it just has to be shortening. It gives you a crisper cookie. If you use butter, it spreads too much. So it has some, and it has some coating of abilities when mixed with flour, with gluten, that make it not quite so chewy, and can give you more, it makes it more flaky. Does that make sense? So there's some great things about it, and it's not used as much as it was, say, in the 60s and 70s. So now we just use oil, where they used to just melt the Crisco down to fry their chicken in. Don't really use it like that
Uh, and
Yeah, over here we use oil, a lot of oil. In our recipes, we use oil, sometimes butter, but shortening or lard. In the countryside, people use lard to fry things.
anymore.
But shortening, we can find it in every supermarket, but it's only for very specific. For example, apple pie. I think people use shortening. Pies that needs to crumble, to be cured. Uh, but it's not. It's really not a thing here. We mostly use oil.
Yeah, and I believe that that really is the way it is now here in the United States. When a recipe really calls for it because it needs some, you know, uh, to cook up a certain way, it calls for shortening. But most of the time we use oil as well. But I do use it for making Ryan's Twinkies.
Mm.
I don't think
did the
that's.
Twinkies ever make it down here?
I think I
Yes.
brought ingredients.
Yeah.
Did I? Because we didn't have an oven at our Airbnb.
Yeah.
I may have sent them back with you at some point, but I don't really remember. Um, I will have to, next time we get an Airbnb down there, it will have an oven. So I can make Twinkies and biscuits.
Talking about that Airbnb, the last time that you were here, you made gravy for us, and that's definitely something that just doesn't exist here. So, like, first of all, what is gravy? Because I can never seem to make it. So, can you explain how to make it?
Gravy is also called a roux, Roux, I believe, or a white sauce. So maybe Brazilians refer to it as a white sauce in some way.
A white sauce would be a cheese, like a Alfredo would be a
Okay.
white sauce.
So the base of a lot of a white sauce or roux is fat and flour and usually milk. So you melt the fat, butter or lard or oil, whatever you want to use, margarine, and then you add flour and some seasonings, and you stir that until it starts turning a little bit brown. needs to get some browning in it to give it some good flavor. And then you dump in the liquid. And then you get a thickened liquid that is high in fat, thus high in flavor. And then you can add things to that. A lot of times the liquid might be meat drippings, from cooking a roast or a turkey or a chicken. Or you may then add cheese. Some cheeses will melt into a white sauce well. Some won't. It just gets stringy and separates and really won't work in. That's why I occasionally, not a lot, but occasionally will use Velveeta, because it makes a great white sauce with the cheese melted in. There's nothing else that will melt in quite like Velveeta.
It was like designed for that, wasn't it? Wasn't that?
Possibly. I'm not really sure. I mean, it shows that's what you would make macaroni and cheese with.
What do
So
you call Velveeta? What is the
Velveeta is just a brand of American cheese. That's all it is. And kind of like Jello and some of those things way back when, that people just call it that.
but
Even though
on the
it's
package it says golden liquid, right? Something like
it
that.
says say liquid gold. You're right. It says
Liquid gold, yeah.
yes, and it's a pasteurized recipe cheese product. And I know
I have a question.
yes.
Sorry. Ro- uh, it- something for me and for Brazilian people when learning English. First time I heard it from Ryan, and then I heard it from you when I went to your Airbnb at near Paulista. You call ground beef hamburger. I remember once Ryan told me he was describing a recipe, and he said, "So you get hamburger and you mix it hamburger. How can I get hamburger and fry a hamburger?" And he said, "Oh, I get the hamburger." And then and he explained it to me. I said, "Oh, okay, ground beef." And then when I was at the Airbnb, you said, "Oh, we have hamburger gravy." And I said, "Ah, okay, hamburger." So is that a regional thing, or it's just that I don't that I the only because I don't talk so much about ground beef or hamburger. Maybe it's just that I don't know so much about it.
It could be a regional thing, and I don't know it. Again, I've mostly lived in the Northwest in my life, and growing up, we always called it hamburger, even though it was technically ground beef. Like I buy it from a little meat market around the corner from our house, and it's ground chuck, which is nice to know because I know what part of the beef they're actually using to make my ground beef. But growing up, we just called it hamburger, even though it was just ground beef. It wasn't in a patty like you obviously think of hamburger. Not really sure. Guess I need to ask around and find out if other parts of the country, or maybe it was just my family, but I believe Annie's family called it that as well. Oh, yeah, good question. Anyway, so that's how you make gravy. So we would make gravy. A typical gravy is going to have some kind of meat drippings in it, and then you put the gravy over potatoes, a lot of mashed potatoes, or biscuits, typically. You also use a white sauce to make a lot of soups. So any kind of cream soup, you would start with a white sauce and then add to it all those vegetables or meats and different kind of things to make a soup.
What are some typical soups there? Like here, one of the most popular soups is chicken soup, which is called canja, and it's eaten with rice and carrots usually.
Okay.
What are some typical soups
So
there?
chicken soup would be a typical soup here too. I think we see it more with pasta noodles than we do with rice, but we
Yeah,
do see it
I
both
make fun of
ways.
Allie sometimes by saying I'm going to make canja noodle soup, and she gets very angry at me because canja has rice, not noodles. and she just,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't
See,
like
Rodrigo, he
dry
just,
soup.
A
Noodles.
vegetable soups are very popular. There might be, oh gosh, sorry. I hope you can edit this out.
Okay. We'll see.
Oh, really choked. Cream of broccoli is a very popular soup used with a white sauce. Cream of leek is a very popular soup. Any given day, if you go to a restaurant and look at the soup of the day, probably maybe half of the time it is some kind of creamed soup. So
So
yeah,
like I like to make stews. Should I be making those from a roux or no?
not stew, not
Okay.
no. Yeah, it's just it'll probably be called cream of tomato. Cream of tomato soup is actually as well. And I've heard that you've been making tomato soup.
Yeah, but I don't usually make it with a roux. I usually just cook.
Make it with butter.
Yeah, a lot of butter. I cook the tomatoes and the butter. I fry them together.
I like to call it butter soup, tomato flavored butter soup. I think
It's really an onion soup with tomato flavoring.
So you're using the butter, but not the flour. So you just probably, and you maybe using more tomatoes to give it some thickness instead of the flour that would thicken it up.
Yeah, but maybe I should try using a roux next time.
Yeah, I use the tomato soup recipe that they use out at Drift Creek Camp.
Oh,
The girls
nice.
time and now, so I can send that to you.
Cool.
So we were just talking about soups, and a roux is an emulsion. And so, of course, I learned this in my Science of Foods class, which was a great class. But there are some foods that do not like to mix. So you have to make an emulsion. You have to do it in a scientific way to make that work. A lot of salad dressings are emulsions, or mayonnaise is an emulsion. And so usually you get a base with a bunch of flavoring in it, and then you have to have a steady drip of the fat or the oil into the emulsion to get it to all come together. Otherwise, it just separates them all. Won't ever go together like oil and water.
I remember
So a roux kind of helps with that. Between the heat and the fat and the flour and the liquid, if you do it in the right order, it will all come together as an emulsion instead of separate.
I remember the first time I made mayonnaise. It said, I don't remember how it said, and I started to pour the oil, and you have to be constantly dripping the oil. And then I said, well, but if I put more liquid, it will become more liquid. But no, as I dripped the oil, it just became mayonnaise. And I think I used eggs, maybe lemon, not lemon, lime, and
Or vinegar.
garlic. Vinegar, yeah, maybe garlic, I don't remember. And blended and just poured oil, and it became magically mayonnaise. From liquid to mayonnaise. It was beautiful.
Right.
It's like you were making a potion, a magical potion that
It makes food better.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when you're making a white sauce, it's not going to thicken until it boils. So, when you first put that flour in there and you put the liquid in, it's really thin. And then as it heats up and finally when it gets to boiling, then it thickens. So it's all in the science, and it's very interesting. That's why I say that my Science of Foods class was one of the best classes I ever took. So.
Yeah, every time that I made the macaroni and cheese, I would be panicking. Like, where's the sauce? It just looks like crap right now until it boiled, and then magically it became a sauce at the moment that it boiled.
Ryan,
Yes.
something that is very common around here. Two meals, two dishes that are common around here. Uh, I don't know how to translate that into English, but it's um, breaded chicken, okay, fried breaded chicken, and corn. We call it uh, corn cream or cream
Creamed
corn,
corn.
but it's just a roux, creamed corn. Yeah, it's just a roux that you blended. You put it in a blender and you blend it with corn, and then you put it back into the fire and into the pan, and it becomes like a thick roux. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we eat that with breaded chicken. Something else that it's very very popular here. It's not chicken parm, but beef parm, Parmigiana beef steak. It's a breaded steak with um, mozzarella cheese and tomato sauce, and it's really really that's my favorite meal of all forever.
I remember we used to get that from the restaurant next door to the school. They had it on Fridays. We would get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the breaded chicken. I saw a recipe last week that I made. It is kind of like a cheating version of that because it said to use creme de leche or cream, milk cream, to marinate the chicken with, it said with saffron and cream to marinate the chicken. And then you put the chicken in flour to get the breading, and then you fry it. And I had never heard of using creme de leche this way before. Is that what you were talking about, Rodrigo?
Yes, yes, but this is a
But,
cheating version exactly.
but it has corn in it, huh? And then they cream it and make a roux and use that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Hmm. I have a recipe called triple dipped chicken. And so you use buttermilk and flour seasoned. And so you do the buttermilk and then the flour and then more buttermilk and then the flour. And like you do that 3 times to get really thick coating and then drop it into the hot oil. And it takes forever to cook. And every time I make it, I think, why did I do that? Because I'm standing over there cooking all these pieces of chicken while everybody else is eating. And 2 hours later, I finally get to eat cold chicken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes a long time. Yeah.
It takes a long time. Yeah.
Even just the one round of the cheating recipe that I used was a lot of work, and I'm
Right.
not
It
sure it was worth it.
uses a lot of oil.
Yeah, yeah. It made me almost want to buy one of those air fryers, but I don't know. What is your
Oh, it's
opinion on
nice.
the air fryers, Mom?
I have not used one. And the only time I have seen one used is at Allie's parents' house. And I believe that Fatima used an air dryer to cook pork. What are those called? And
The what is the
yeah,
name, Rodrigo? They're really
bacon.
popular with feijoada.
Torresmo.
Torresmo, yes.
And I saw her put them in and started, and I thought, oh, those are going to be yucky. Like, why would you do those with? Those are supposed to be cooked and deep fried, and they were very tasty. I wouldn't have guessed that that's how she had cooked them. So I have not got on that bandwagon yet and tried an air fryer, although we probably should in this house.
It'd be better for your health, that's for sure.
Much better for our health. Yes,
And think of all the money you'd save on oil.
on oil. Yes,
You'd pay
yeah,
for the air fryer in no time.
right. Yeah. So you were asking me about Brazilian foods and what else was different. And one of the things that is very interesting, like the first and second time that we made trips down there is you and Allie we would go out for dinner and you would say what the dish was and we would order it and we'd eat it and it was beans and rice and it was good and we would eat it. And then you're like, oh, well, we need to go to this Minas place. And we're like, and you'd call it something else. And then we'd go and they'd bring it out to us and it would be beans and rice. So it's just so interesting that you have all these dishes and they're from all over different states of Brazil and called all these different things, but ultimately they are beans and rice with meat. And you don't really find anything like that in the United States. Um,
Yeah, that's definitely something that I realized about the United States is that there is no American food. It doesn't
there
exist.
American food. And I don't know that Americans, except for when we go out for Mexican food, would put beans and rice together. I do remember in grade school, our teacher one time, our class won a prize. I don't remember what we did. And he served chili over brown rice. And I remember thinking that was so, so odd that you would put beans and rice together because at least myself growing up, when you would fix a meal, there would be a starch and a meat and a vegetable. And those were the three components of a meal. And so having beans and rice would be two carbs. And as you know, in the Kaufman house, we don't do two carbs in a meal. Right?
Well, come to Brazil where we have 5 carbs in one meal, and yeah, maybe a protein also, maybe, but definitely got to get those carbs.
Yeah, so strange. Like Ryan, like when we have a typical American breakfast, it's either pancakes or French toast or hash browns with eggs and bacon. And Ryan wants to have two of those, and I refuse to do it. And he recently told me that I have control issues.
Well, when
But
I make breakfast here, that's what I make. I make potatoes and waffles and eggs and bacon all together, and maybe toast also. Toast, sure.
so anyway, so yeah, your guys is putting beans and rice together. Just to me, the way I was raised seems like it's just such a carb overload. Oh, and I don't think my parents and grandparents used a lot of beans. My grandma always had a pot of beans on her table, no matter what. She could be making spaghetti and meatballs for dinner, but there'd also be a pot of beans, and they were cooked, like you would cook them. I think most Americans nowadays, for the most part, just open a can of pre-cooked beans. We're a fast food nation, and beans just take too long to cook. And until recently, when Instapots got popular, it takes all day to cook beans. And so, yeah, most people just open a can of beans.
Why not pressure cookers? Because with a pressure cooker like I have, you can cook beans in 30
Right.
minutes, 45 minutes maybe.
Just not something that happened. My mom had a small pressure cooker like yours when I was a kid, and it was nice because she could get home from work and do beans or potatoes or rice or something, really quick as compared to how long it would take. But I don't know that anybody else that I knew had a small kitchen. We had pressure cookers for canning, but not for cooking everyday meals.
Right.
And it didn't get popular until a few years ago when the Instapots came into being.
I might be saying something silly here, but that's what I observed. Pressure cook Pressure cookers are big in the city. When you go to the countryside, people just cook it slowly,
Okay.
uh, and I think it's because of the time you spend in traffic here, the time you spend going and coming or commuting, and you have to come home. Like for example, Mari left work at 6, and she arrived home at 7:30. So and she needed to cook, and so you need to make something in 30 minutes. So we have two pressure cookers, and um, I usually use one for the meat and one for beans, and it's that's how we do it. but in the countryside they use iron pans or stone pans, and they cook it real slowly. You know.
Like how feijoada is traditionally prepared, which is like an 8-hour ordeal. That like the last time that Fatima made feijoada, I think was when you guys were here, and she got up at like dawn to start cooking that for us to have for a late lunch at like 2 or 3 o'clock is when we finally ate. And she was up at like 5 o'clock to start making it because you have to get everything prepared into the pot and start the pot cooking to give it, I don't know, 7 hours, 8 hours to cook properly.
Right, and there's a lot of cuts of meat that get tougher with the high temperature, where that's why I use a crock pot a lot. You can use a cheaper cut of meat and cook it at that lower temperature, and then it never gets tough.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a long time.
Ryan, have you ever showed dulce de leche to your mom, your dad?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they know what, like condensed milk in a pressure cooker.
Yes, but then but the way you make it, real dulce de leche, it's you just put milk and sugar. It's a lot of milk and a lot of sugar, and you cook it for 4 to 5 hours until it browns, and then it becomes thick, brown and thick, and then you have dulce de leche, and of course, very very good.
Mm-hmm. And you can cook it like a little bit and you get a syrup. You get like a caramel type syrup. And you can cook it longer and you get like a hard candy.
Yeah, that's but no milk. That's when you don't add milk.
Yeah.
And then you get rapadura, which is very hard, very very hard candy. It's like a block of, I don't know, and or you get molasses, and something similar to that.
I noticed that people in Brazil like a lot of custard and like flans. That's what they're called here. Um,
Pudding, condensed milk pudding.
okay, yeah. Those are pretty old fashioned. I mean, they may have been used a lot, like even before my time. I never had seen a flan. Maybe at a high end restaurant they might bring it out, but it's just not something. And custards you don't see very much anymore either. Um,
Custard.
I only thought of flan as a Mexican dessert. When
right.
I came here and I saw it for the first time because I had never seen one in my life, I thought, oh, it's a Mexican flan. but actually, you're right. It's just a very old dessert in the United States.
Right.
Probably so old that like even Grandma Jean probably didn't eat it that much. It was something that her mom would have made, right?
Right. Yes. And I think it's because it's eggs and milk. It's from off the farm, you know. So it was ingredients that were available, eggs and um, flour and sugar. Actually, not even any flour. Eggs and milk and sugar. And you cook it, and there might be some different flavors to it. But it was just very, very healthy. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they did not have to buy from the grocery store.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, One of the other things on Rodrigo's list was corn flour.
Yeah.
And can't really answer that question for you, Rodrigo, because I think the only times I've ever used corn flour was to maybe make a tamale soup. And so you would use corn flour instead of wheat flour for the thickening to give it a corn flavor.
What about cornbread?
Cornbread is very popular and something that I was raised eating a lot of when I was a kid with beans. So we would have beans and cornbread were very typical meal that we probably had at least once a week.
We have
Yeah.
something around here that's similar to a tamale, but it's sweet and it's corn and condensed milk put together, and then you serve it in the corn.
In the
Uh,
husk?
yeah. You serve it in. You wrap that around the that sweet, and it's called pamonha, and it's very very sweet, and it tastes. It has a strong corn taste. It's really really good.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like that sweet in a corn husk.
They actually have here, like on the side of the highways, these corn restaurants that are like rest stops, kind of, where you can pull off of the highway and get a snack, go to the bathroom, do whatever. But everything on the menu is corn. So they have corn juice, these pamonha things, corn fries, corn, everything. Everything is corn. And you
And
can,
it's called Pamonha's Ranch.
yeah.
Is there one of those on the way to
Yes,
parents?
there are
Yes.
several.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought it was a gimmick type of thing.
Ah,
Ah,
kind of is, but the
Yeah,
gimmick is it's corn.
Rodrigo, are you familiar with that term
yeah,
gimmick?
yeah. Not familiar, but I know it. Being around Ryan, I know it.
Do I have a gimmick? Is that what you're saying? My gimmick is that I'm
No,
American or that I'm
ah,
charming. Is that my gimmick?
well, you may say so. Maybe your diploma behind you. Yeah.
um, just to, uh, uh, before we got talking about this, I mentioned feijoada, and I think it's really interesting that you learned how to make it. Um,
Yeah.
so
When I believe on one of your earlier trips here, we found a little food cart in Portland that was a Brazilian food cart, and they served feijoada, and so we had it. I thought it was wonderful. You said it was okay, and we do like beans. I really should use them more often because they are such a cheap protein to use. So I looked up some recipes, and some of them I said, no, I'm not going to make that one because it had all sorts of weird body parts.
yeah,
Uh, but I did find a recipe that I used that had a pork sausage as well as bacon. I think I used some pork chops. Anyway, just all these different kinds of pork. And I've made it probably a couple of times a year for quite a few years. And I made it for a group that we meet with on a regular basis one night. And we had a little bit of a Brazilian meal. They were all very impressed and just absolutely loved it.
did you make it in your crock pot or did
Yeah.
you cook it on the stove?
I believe I've made it both ways, but well, maybe I didn't make it in the crock pot. Sometimes I'll make it on the stove and then pour it in the crock pot to kind of keep on hold until dinner's ready. Um, but I did, use the beans or, cook the beans from scratch, although there's lots of recipes for feijoada out there to use canned beans.
Of course.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um,
nice.
yeah. Yeah, it's fun learning about the Brazilian culture. Again, so much of the time it has, you learn it through food and just traditions and different foods for different things. It's also, represents what you grow in your area, which is very interesting. I wouldn't have known that corn was grown in Brazil so much. I think of corn as a Midwest. And we can
Yeah.
grow here, and we do.
I think if we compare the production of the American production of corn and Brazilian, Africa produces much, much more corn than Brazil. But we in the south, São Paulo, Minas, southwest of Brazil, we do have a lot of corn.
Mm. Yeah. Well, you guys produce just about everything, correct?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
For agriculture, yeah, all of the food, yeah.
yeah. I thought it was interesting the way you get your milk just to drink. It's not refrigerated. And I'm assuming that's kind of logistical reasons because the city's so big. And how would they bring milk in every day to every store? But I don't really know that that's the answer.
Do you know, Rodrigo, if in the country it's different? Like in Sao Paulo, it's like that for logistical reasons, but in tiny cities in the countryside, do they have fresh milk there?
Yes, they do. They have more than in the city. Okay, it's not the main source of milk, but they still do have much more than in the city. Um, and and it's weird. Ryan told me that he said it's weird that most of your food here is fresh, but the milk is the opposite. Uh, and for example, Brenda, you said that most Americans nowadays they would just open a can of beans, of pre-cooked beans. And here in Brazil, we don't we never got into canned food or pre-cooked food, not so much. But our milk is um, it's kind of like Velveeta, you know. And it's in a box and
Yeah.
And
it's just not really fresh and it won't go.
um, I know that Allie's family, they actually started buying milk in a plastic bag recently, and I'm not sure what the difference is with its production, but I know that they've started getting it in a bag instead of a box. I don't know if that's
That
different somehow, but
that's we the old people here in Brazil are before the 80s. That's how milk was sold. That's how
yeah.
milk it started to be sold, like, or to be industrialized. So there's type A, type B, and type C. Type A is better. Type B and C are not as fat. It's like skim and then 3 and 2%, something like
Uh-huh.
that. And it's a bit fresher than box milk.
And I think it is more fresh because I was just there this weekend, and when I got up in the morning to have coffee, João pulled out some milk from the freezer that he was keeping good instead of leaving it, like the box that's just in the closet. And he had to defrost the milk because the milk was frozen to keep it from going bad. And so he put this bag of milk into a boiling pot of water to defrost it so he could pour the milk into his coffee.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Noticed on our last trip down there also, you guys don't have a lot of canned food. And I came to realize that because the Airbnb that we were staying in did not have a can opener. And I took canned food down and we could not get it open. And so Ryan brought us this crazy little tool that we could not figure out how to use. And then when I went to the grocery store, I realized why not every household has a can opener, because your what we would put in cans, you guys put in pouches. And I'm curious as to why that is. One of my guesses is that our steel worker unions have a lot of clout. Is that possibly true?
Um, yeah, I actually saw something about this. Soon after I came here, there was a documentary I watched about the packaging industry, and the packaging of all of these things. I can't think of what it's called. It's a specific type of packaging that all of the milk, all of the like creme de leche, condensed milk. All these things come in these. It's not quite cardboard, but it's like plastic cardboard.
Right.
And the companies that make this are super powerful.
Tetra Pak.
Yes, Tetra Pak. Yes, Tetra Pak.
And we're more of that for sure. Like our tuna fish, you know, you can buy in a pouch. But everything in the Brazilian stores, their tomato sauce, pasta sauce.
Our tuna fish is in a can.
Your tuna fish is in a can. Interesting. Okay.
And you can lift it. It doesn't require you to open it.
Okay.
Lifts off.
And many of our cans have moved to that too, but not a typical can of corn or green beans or something like that. You know, you have to use a can opener.
Mm-hmm. And I finally found canned chicken, like right before the quarantine started. I found a store that sold canned chicken, so I could make, you know, chicken salad sandwiches.
Yeah.
But I can't get it now because, yeah, canned chicken, like tuna fish, but chicken.
Show you one. Hold on. You guys keep talking. I'll
Ground chicken.
Yeah, well, not ground, canned.
But is it in cubes or?
Yeah, it's in cubes.
How is it?
In cubes in water. And so you just open the can and then you can make like a chicken salad with mayonnaise. You mix it with mayonnaise and maybe some garlic and put it on bread, and then you have a meal.
Well, I also use it for soups. Or casseroles. You can make a really quick meal because you have pre-cooked chicken in a can and you can just dump it in. And it's amazing how people don't realize that I've used. In fact, I made quesadillas for a bunch of teenage girls recently. And do you guys know what a quesadilla is?
Yeah.
And usually melted cheese, and you can throw other things. And I used canned chicken, and they were watching me make it. And they didn't say anything until afterwards. And then they were eating and they said, "This is really good. We never would have guessed that you use canned chicken." So anyway, this I buy, it's a 6-pack at Costco of big cans. And it really comes in handy when you're trying to put together a quick meal, or, you know, you don't have to cook the chicken before you turn it into a casserole.
That one I never saw here in Brazil.
I finally saw it. I've been looking for it since I came here because I really like to have canned chicken. It was something that I really like to have around, just like Mom said.
Send me a picture when you buy it, so I can see if I find it again.
All right. It was at Pão de Açúcar, of course. And the last thing that we want to ask you about is different types of lettuce, of green vegetables. And one example is earlier today I was eating something that is called escarola in Portuguese. And I looked up the translation, and it's called endive.
Endive.
Okay. And first of all, is that the correct translation? Because I have never heard of this vegetable in my life.
Actually, endive lettuce has been around for a long time. When you put lettuce, different types of lettuce on the list, I'm like, So when I was growing up, all we usually ever had was head lettuce. So is that what is typically you buy at the grocery store in Brazil?
And it's usually the head lettuce that we have. What are the different types of, because in the United States, there's many different types of head lettuce even.
Right. There's butter lettuce. There's just the typical head lettuce, which tends to be the cheapest. And then there are different kinds of head lettuce. And then there's different types of leaf lettuce, which would be romaine, green leaf, red leaf, endive. And again, growing up, I didn't see a lot of that. Maybe if you went to a very nice restaurant, you would get a salad with mixed greens, with some of those other kinds. But again, in my family, it was just always head lettuce. Nowadays, probably people use less head lettuce and more of the different kinds of leaf lettuces when they go shopping at our grocery stores.
Mhm.
Here in Brazil, we have two very popular kinds of leaf lettuce, which is crespa and lisa, smooth and rugged, something like this. Just the name.
Hmm.
They're very similar. And head lettuce, we call it American lettuce.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the three, and then all the other kinds of leaf lettuce that you described, we call it other things. And I found it here that escarola can be translated as chicory, also, or escarole, but yeah, chicory. And I in depending on the state, in the countryside, they eat much more leaves than or green vegetables, and they eat everything, all kinds of leaves and everything in the countryside. So a lot of uh, we eat a lot of cress
Why? Okay.
that is sour. Um,
My grandma always had watercress growing in her spring. She had spring water, and where the spring came up, there was a little pool, and we just couldn't wait to the times of the year when the watercress would grow on it. It's quite the delicacy in the United States. Oh,
and
but you have a lot of cress type leafy vegetables that you eat. Do they live in water like watercress, or I guess I don't know. I've only seen watercress, not other kinds of cress.
no, not that I know of. Not that I know of. It's similar to arugula. I don't know if
Right.
that's how to pronounce. It's to me, I don't eat any vegetables like any. So to me, they're all the same. It's all like leaves and green stuff.
They're all green. So
Yeah, they're all food that my food eats. So
Well, you
uh,
know, the greener it is, the more nutrients it has. I think any kind of lettuce really doesn't have a heck of a lot of nutrients, but a green leaf lettuce is going to have more than American head lettuce for sure. I don't know that there's any nutrients on head lettuce. I think we,
it's
at least,
mostly water, isn't it?
yeah, in our family's case, we use it to put a sauce on. Like
Yes.
that's the reason that we have sauces is to put on lettuce that doesn't really have a flavor and taste and no nutritional value.
I know that for my dad, that lettuce is just an excuse to pile blue cheese on.
Correct.
hmm.
Yes.
And we have something here called we call it chouchou. I don't know how to say that in English. Let me see. Uh, coyote. Coyote. I don't know.
Hmm.
Let me see. Let me see.
I don't know that term either.
Chayote. It's it tastes like not. It tastes like water. You know, it seems. It looks like potato. It's green, and when you cook it, it looks like potato, and it tastes like. Um, my father-in-law, he usually says that it's the fourth state of water. It's just ice, and then steam, water, and chayote because it tastes like nothing.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't really
But
know.
it's very common here in Brazil. Very
and
common and very cheap.
and something that like today when we were having the endive or the arugula, something that people like to do is fry it. They chop it up and put some butter in the pot and fry the greens. Especially with like
Yeah.
feijoada. If you're gonna have feijoada someday, what you do is you fry the greens and then serve them with the feijoada.
So they like crispy fried,
Yeah,
not just
Yeah.
wilted fried.
yeah,
And you put garlic
yeah.
and you fry garlic and you mix it all and it tastes like heaven for people
And
that
it
like green vegetables.
has kale been the rage in Brazil like it has been here because it's so high.
Yes.
And I love fresh kale, uncooked, but I tried to cook it one day and it tasted really bad. I couldn't eat it, and I love spinach and a lot of those greens that turnip greens and those kind of things that you would think would be similar. But I thought that the kale, once it was cooked, was nasty. So,
Kale is the thing you eat with feijoada. It's kale.
right, you chop it up, and
Yeah.
so we had it. It was just raw. But then I think when we were in Brazil, we might have had a dish where it had been fried really crispy and put on top, and it was very good.
Mhm.
So I don't know how they made it taste better than when I tried it. But
Lots of butter, probably.
maybe.
Uh, nice. So, I think that's it. Do you have anything else to talk about? No?
Not well, a lot,
Ah,
but not that I can think of at the moment.
cool. So then, thanks a lot for coming in and answering questions and teaching us all about food.
Yeah, it was fun. I love to do it. And I do love going to the grocery store and just taking a look at how Brazilians live differently than I do here in small town USA.
Yeah. I hope you get to come down soon and see it and taste some Brazilian food again.
Yes, we are looking forward to that next trip. I wish it was booked, but not going to happen soon, I don't think.
And thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you all next week here on Ryan and Rodrigo. Don't forget to like and subscribe.